Hi everyone, I'm Mark Harrison and this is A History of Rome. In this special episode, we're going to take a look at the constitution and the military of the Roman kingdom. Firstly, it must be noted that the records of early Rome were lost in 390 BC. As to why, well, we'll get to that in future episodes. Suffice to say that much of what we know about the Roman kingdom relies heavily on what later Roman historians such as Livy wrote, and much of that is shrouded in legend. These legends are the basis for what we know as the traditional story of the founding of Rome through its regal period and into the early days of the Republic. But how and when the early structures of government were developed is perhaps less important than the fact that they were. The Roman kingdom was, to begin with, an elected monarchy, though the tales of the three legendary Etruscan kings do point to the fact that this elected system was, by its end, turning into more of a hereditary one. Under the original system, following the death of a king, the Senate would convene and choose an interrex, one of their own who would oversee the affairs of state and together with the Senate would help to select a new candidate from their own number for the kingship. This period was known as an interregnum. Once a suitable candidate had been chosen, his appointment was then put before the Comitia Curiata for ratification of the people. Following that, the Senate then imparted the power of imperium on the selected individual and he became the King of Rome. Imperium granted the king unlimited powers for life. The Senate could advise, they could propose ideas, and the people could be asked to ratify, but in the end the king could ignore them all and do as he pleased. So, who were these senators from whom the monarch was chosen? Well, the word senate derives from the Latin word for old man, senex. Senate literally means a bunch of old men. But this was not unusual for the time, as most tribal societies were based upon the rule of a group of male elders, and Rome was no different in that respect. The number of senators are recorded as having been 100 to begin with, later expanding to 200, with 300 being present by the time of the early Republic. The Comitia Curiata was a popular assembly that consisted of men from the original patrician clans. They were divided into 30 curiae, 10 for each clan. Apart from ratifying the Senate's choice of king, they also ratified decrees that were made by the king. Beyond that, their responsibility extended to family law. This is unsurprising, as a Roman male was the ultimate authority over every member of his family, even having the power of life and death over them. Additional to these tasks, the Comitia Curiata met to hear important announcements. These meetings could be held at any time, but it was more usual for it to be done so on the calends or the nones, that is the first of the month and the 5th or 7th day respectively. As time progressed and Rome grew, the initial governmental structures gradually became unfit for use, and to update the system a new assembly was created, one which Livy ascribes to the legendary 6th king Servius Tullius. In truth, the reforms are likely to have come from societal pressures. As Rome's population grew, the proportion of the people that had any sort of influence on the state became smaller. It appears to have been an attempt to redress that balance. Under what we know today as the Servian constitution, a census was introduced, and with it the new position of censor. The censor would assess all male citizens in order to determine their wealth. This was extremely important as it would, in turn, determine that person's obligations to the state, whether they be military obligations, tax liabilities, or voting rights. Once assessed and registered, each citizen would then be assigned a position within a newly formed assembly called the Comitia Centuriata. The Comitia Centuriata was divided into centurii, a group of 100 men, though in practice the numbers did vary. Each centuria was further divided into the seniores, that is men between the ages of 46 and 60, and the juniores, those from the age of 17 to 45. This latter grouping made up Rome's citizen army, whilst the former were assigned home defence and policing duties, a sort of Dad's army of the ancient world. The wealth assessment also placed each citizen into one of 5 classes, with the richest in the first class, the next wealthiest in the second class, and so on. This classification was important for when the people were asked to vote, for Class 1 voted first, then Class 2, etc., until there was a majority. This often meant in practice that a majority decision was reached before those in the 5th class had a chance to vote, and because voting stopped once a majority was reached, the poorest naturally had the least say. This class division was also used as the basis for the military. At this time, Rome's army was a citizen militia that would fight as and when required. To begin with, the army was selected from the wealthiest members of the 3 original tribes. They were organised into the infantry, the pedites, and the cavalry, the celeres, with a ratio of around 10:1. Being influenced by the Greeks to the south and the Etruscans to the north, who were in their turn influenced by the Greeks, the Romans initially fought in the Greek-style phalanx formation, with the spear and shield being the weapons of choice. Now, after the Servian reforms, the army was open to a wider pool of men, which allowed the Romans to field armies that were larger in number and more flexible in their approach to warfare. The wealthiest classes still formed the backbone of the army, but the lower classes were now used to bolster the numbers. As the regal period came to an end, the Roman soldier looked very similar to a Greek hoplite, armed with spear, shield and sword, and equipped with a breastplate, greaves and helmet as finances allowed. On the field of battle, they were divided into 3 lines. The youngest and wealthiest would constitute the first 2 lines and were known as the principes and the hastati. These would form the main battle lines. A 3rd reserve line would be made up of veteran soldiers, and these were known as the triarii. As for the poorer members of society, they would constitute groups of skirmishers called the rurarii. Finally, the equestrian and senatorial classes would form the cavalry units. The 3-line system gave the Romans the ability to be much more flexible in a fight against more rigid enemy formations, and the opening of recruitment to poorer citizens allowed them to field more armies and with greater numbers of troops. All this meant that the Roman army was increasingly able to effectively deal with its growing number of adversaries as its borders expanded. The Servian reforms, it could be argued, left Rome in a strong position to defend its interests in both domestic and foreign affairs at a time of instability when it transitioned from the kingdom into the republic. The reforms also give an early glimpse into Rome's ability to adapt to circumstances, something that would be a hallmark of the centuries to come. It would prove an ability that would help this small settlement on the Tiber to become the foremost power in the ancient world. We hope that you've enjoyed this special on the Roman military and political systems during the regal period, and that you'll join us again for our next regular episode. And if you like our work, please help by subscribing, pressing the bell button and commenting. And we'll see you next time on A History of Rome.